Amen. Good evening, brothers and sisters. What a joy to see the church so full. And for me, it has been a real joy, as Father Pablo said. But you know, the Lord gives us great surprises, because when Father Michael asked me to come to Dundalk, and I was going to be coming, and the pandemic visited all of us, I would have been coming on my own, because most of you know that I worked for 43 years with Father Kevin Scallon, and we worked all over the world in over 100 countries. And in the 25th of June 2018, Father Kevin died very suddenly. He wasn't sick, only one day. He had you would say, beautiful death, because the day before he had spent about 3 hours in adoration. He was always saying to me, I hope when Jesus comes, he takes me fast. Well, he did, because he went to bed on Sunday night, and on Monday, I found him dead in his little place in Florida. So, you know, just to tell you how the Lord works, I thought I had priest retreats, diocesan retreats I was going to be giving, and different retreats, which I did, a few of them. And then, of course, we had everything closed down. But didn't God know? Because it was just at the end of the pandemic that Father Pablo, who is from Spain, a diocesan priest, whom I knew his family, some of the members of his family, but he's down in the jungles of Costa Rica with the indigenous people working, and he read some article that I had written for somebody that he knew, and he was asked to read it. And it was at that time that he got the desire to come and make a retreat or meet me. And he came to Florida, and it was during that time on his visit that I had exactly the same message. You know, brothers and sisters, when you have faith in the real presence of Jesus, when you have divine faith, because there's a difference in human faith. Human faith is we're in a big battle with human faith trying to destroy our faith in God. And faith in God is divine. You get it through prayer, through intimacy, through coming to Mass, through prayer. Well, when I prayed 46 years ago, I was younger, and I was praying because I was in a ministry beginning in South America and many places on my own. And one day the Lord spoke to me and told me that he was going to send a priest. I would meet him. I would come to know much about the priesthood, and together we would travel the world, and that I would meet this priest. And I was over at Mother Angelica's in EWTN at the time, making a retreat. And on the 16th of July, 1976, I met Father Kevin Scallon in All Hallows. His brother Gerald was the one who said to me, you should really go for this. My brother's starting a ministry for priests in intercession. And together we traveled all over the world. Well, the same happened. The only difference is that I think the Lord said, well, you'd enough of the Irishman, I'm giving you a Spaniard now. So along comes this priest whom I could be his mother. And when I got this word, I'm sending Pablo. He will teach you also much about my priesthood through his ministry and his ministry to priests. And together you will minister to my priests and people. And you know the great sign when it is God, because he has his cardinal in Madrid said yes, and his bishop that he works with in the indigenous zone down in Costa Rica. And that's why, if I had come 2 years ago, I'd be doing it all alone. But isn't he a wonderful gift? What a gift God sent to me. And we have traveled many places already in Europe, and many missions since almost 2 years. And we will be going to Poland next week for over 100 priests in Poland for the intercession. And then we will be leaving for Brazil and Argentina for priest retreats. And so I thank God. But I'm so happy because, you know, brothers and sisters, for me, coming here was like coming home. There's not too many places in the world where I go where somebody walks up to me and hands me a photograph of myself in a cookery class in Jonesborough School and says, I was in your class. And I met more people, I don't know them personally, but I know who they are. And so for me to see the faith and to know that, yes, as Father Pablo said, we've all this bad news, we hear so many things from the media and so many horrible things about our church and the priesthood. And yet, I have to tell you that I know without a doubt that, as Father said, it only takes us to have something like this mission. And we spoke to you already about the power of the Eucharist. I talked to you about the martyrs of Ireland, of the faith of the Irish and how they fought against what we're fighting today. We're fighting the enemy, but he has taken a different disguise. When Cromwell came to Ireland and when we had all the persecution, it was clear that we were not going to abandon our Catholic faith, nor were we going to throw our priests to the enemy. People died in Ireland for it. But nowadays, Satan has dressed in different outfit. Now he has taken the way of modernism, secularism, and to tell us, you don't need the church. You can make your own decisions. And what is happening is that human faith is running our governments. When you think back to the guards, you think of the Eucharistic Congress, most of us weren't around in 1932, where there was a million. You think of seeing our government standing for the morals because they were Catholic, they were Christian. Look at today. We have sold our soul to every secular thing, and yet we're on the right side because with Jesus, we can conquer. Because St. Patrick came to an island that was pagan, that had all kinds of horrible things happening. And what did he do? He preached the gospel. He spoke Jesus' word, and people were converted. Our dioceses were set up. And that's why I would say to you, I just want to talk to you a little bit about what we're going to do here tonight and tell you a few of the powerful testimonies I've seen. I said to you that human faith tells you have to prove it. I don't believe that. I don't believe the church has any right to tell me what to do. I can make my own decisions. And you say, go ahead, look at the world. Look what's happening in all these places where God is abandoned. And look at the people on the other side who have divine faith. You can only grow in this faith through prayer. You can only, if you never talk to Jesus, if you never pray, if Catholics don't go to Mass, it's the biggest weapon Satan uses to destroy them, is to get us to become indifferent, to say, I'm going to sit at home. There's a big temptation now since coronavirus that we can sit in our room and watch Mass on television. And I keep telling people, it's like telling your mother, I have a lovely photograph of you here on the mantelpiece, so I'm not coming to see you anymore because you look lovely in the photograph and you don't go near. Well, it's the same with Jesus. Jesus is here in the church every Sunday feeding us with this victory. And that is the secret to divine faith. When you come, and it's not a feeling, it's not to make you feel good, it's to give you supernatural strength and faith. And when you have that kind of faith, you'll see miracles. One of the biggest obstacles I encounter in my work is when people say to me, Sister Briege, I don't have enough faith, or I don't feel worthy to be healed, or there's people worse off than me, and say, what I have is not cure. There's no cure for it. And tell you two beautiful stories. This happened some time ago when I was giving a retreat with Father Kevin in Australia. And some of you may have heard it, but it's very powerful. At this retreat was a nun, a sister from Sydney. And I stayed at her convent during this retreat that we were giving in Sydney, and then we went to Brisbane, and she came on the team with us. But she made me beautiful meals, but she never eat. she had a big jar with like green stuff in it, And after a while, I got curious and I said, she's cooking for me, but why is she not eating it? So I said, Sister Margaret, why do you never eat? I was there for like 4 days or 5. And she would come in, we'd have our dinner, and she never said anything. So my curiosity, I said to her, Margaret, why don't you eat? Do you just have one portion for me only? And she said, no, Briege, I have no muscles in my esophagus. I have a deformity in my esophagus. And for years, we didn't know what was wrong, and I would throw up, I get very sick. And she said, only 7 years ago, a young specialist said to her, I have a feeling it's not your stomach, because they thought it was something else. And when they took the tests, they noticed that there was no contraction, the food wouldn't go down, and it was a deficiency from birth. So it happened when she was born. So she said, I looked at her and I said, when did you find out? She said, 7 years ago. I said to her, did you ever ask Jesus to heal you? And she looked at me and she says, but Briege, I'm really not sick. I said, what? You can't eat. You can only take liquidized food in a blender. And she said, oh, yes. She said, I was born like this. And I said, well, he could redo you. I definitely, if you know that Jesus can do the impossible. I told her my story. I said, I was told in Musgrave Park Hospital that, as a young 18, 19-year-old girl, that I would probably be crippled. I was told by the best doctors in America. When I went to America for the Florida sunshine, didn't do a thing, it nearly killed me, so hot. But I was told nothing could be done. And yet, brothers and sisters, in one instant, my body was straightened. I wasn't asking for that healing. And I told Margaret this. I said, Margaret, you should really ask. I wasn't asking, but I was asking for something that I want you to ask for tonight as well. I realized, even though I was told I was going to be in a wheelchair, and I was in awful pain, and I was on all kinds of experimental drugs in America, I knew as a young sister, going to America from here, there was one thing I wanted more than anything else, was to fall in love with Jesus. I knew about him. And lots of Catholics know about Jesus. And we know, we go to Mass and we do all. But there's a big difference in knowing a person personally and knowing about him. And it's not something, you think, well, how will I get to know him? I can't see him. But that's why Jesus said, ask, pray to the Holy Spirit. And that's what I went on a retreat for, because I thought, all these nuns are leaving, there's all kinds of things happening. And I said, Jesus, I don't really want anything. I'm willing to be in a wheelchair, but I can't be a saint if I'm not authentic, if I don't love Jesus, if my heart is not, I have a ring on my finger, I was dressed as a bride, given away at the altar. But for what? Wouldn't it be foolish? And that's what I say to Catholics. Why would you just go through the motions when Jesus is saying to you, I am alive. I'm a living person. I talk to you. I will help you, but you have to talk to me like a person, not that I'm like some kind of a robot or I'm something just to make you feel good. I died for you and I love you. So I said to Margaret, at 8:45 on a Sunday morning in 1970, I met Jesus in person. How? Not seeing, but I know, as I know here, that he's real. He's a person. He's risen. He's not just some symbol. So I said to her, Margaret, if I were you, I love to eat. I thought, my God, imagine never being able to eat. I said, Margaret, you should really ask Jesus. And she looked at me and she said, oh, God bless your faith, Briege, but I don't think I have that kind of faith. So I said to her, well, I'll ask for you. So we went on the retreat. And every time I'd see Margaret, I'd say to her, did you ask yet? So it came to the healing service. And I was saying to her, Margaret asked. And then it was a group of sisters and priests. And I said, there's going to be the anointing for people who are sick, who had different diseases and things. And I said, Margaret, you should really get anointed. And she says, but I'm not sick. Can you imagine? And I said, well, you are sick, you may not know it. But I said, you need to ask Jesus. You have this serious problem. It's very hard when you travel. And I made a bribe with her. I said, Margaret, I'm going to Italy to some conference. And she was going to be going to Italy. I said, I know a great Italian restaurant, and I'll bring you there when you're able to swallow. Would you believe it? We go, Father Kevin, and she got anointed. And when we were praying, I was put my hand on my throat and saying, Jesus, please help her. Because I had this feeling. She worked with young people. And this would be a great, I was saying, Lord, this woman needs faith to believe in the impossible. So she came to the retreat, and we finished, and she went home back to Sydney. And it was summertime for them, so she was on her own in the convent. And she said to me before she left, Briege, how will I know I'm healed? Because if I eat, I choke. So I said to her, don't worry. Jesus is his own way of telling you. Well, wait till you hear. She goes back to the convent, and she's getting her liquidized food ready. And she got a longing for a lamb chop. And she thought, a lamb chop? So she looked in the fridge, and sure enough, there was a lamb chop in there. She took it out, she cooked it, and she cooked carrots and a good dinner. And she said, when she told us the story, she said she sat and looked at the dinner, and she said, there's nobody here. And Jesus, if I choke to death, I'm going to enjoy this anyway. So she took the dinner. But she waited. Did you ever, often when you pray and you think, I feel better, but it might come back. So she's sitting there thinking, I feel great. And it didn't come back. And she said, you can become a kind of accepting, I hope it's not true. Maybe I am healed. The next morning, she took cereal, no reaction. And then she called a Dominican priest. We were in a Dominican parish, given a parish mission. And she called the priest because she was a friend of his. And she said to him, Father, something happened to me. And he said, what? She said, I'm after eating all kinds of stuff. I've never had it in my life. And I feel wonderful. He said, Margaret, go to the doctor. And he said that you might need the doctor, but the doctor might need you. So she made an appointment. She couldn't get into the specialist that tested her before. So she went to her GP local. And when he saw her, typical, he said, Margaret, it's probably you're excited and you're adrenal. And he was giving her all this explanation because he couldn't explain it. So he said, I'll tell you what you do. Come back in about a week and eat everything you can see and come and see me. Thought I'll never see her again. A week later, she went back. So we made an appointment with the same specialist that she had been tested 7 years before, who had the x-rays of the deformity of nothing there, all this deformity in her esophagus area. And she went there, and she's sitting in the waiting room, and the doctor, they came out and they took her in, and the specialist said, so you think you're healed? Well, she said, I don't really know, but she said the food is staying down and I feel great, and I put on a couple of pounds. And he said, are you sure you want the test? Because it's very uncomfortable. So they put the balloon down and they did everything. And they told her then, they took all the x-rays and tests, to go out and wait in the waiting room. And all these people are waiting in the waiting room, scared because they're waiting for results. And she's sitting there thinking, well, it'll be interesting to see what has happened. So out comes this little attendant, the doctor's, and he's crying. And he said, come in. And all the people were looking at her, probably thinking, this poor woman is going to get really bad news. She goes in, and the specialist was weeping. And he had the x-rays in his hand. And he went and researched and got the other x-ray. And you know that Sister Margaret had a brand new set of muscles. Now, she went home, and she had the biggest party for the youth. And she came to Ireland. And at the time, my Mother General was Sister Margaret McGill. And she said, I wasn't in Ireland at the time. She said, Sister Margaret told me Sister Margaret from Australia came to visit me. I've never seen anybody so excited at eating a piece of bread, she said. She wanted to show me that she could eat. And Margaret said to me later, she still writes to me, she said, Sister Briege, I was 50 years old, and I was telling people about God, and I was teaching, and yet when it came to myself, I limited him. And that's what we do. And that's why I tell you that here, the same Jesus that performed miracles, I could stand here for hours and tell you about the miracles, but I'm just going to finish with one because it happened very close here. Some years ago, I was in RD, Father Murphy's parish, and I don't even know if he knows this, but we had, Father Kev and myself at a mission, and a doctor came to see me, I think he was from Dublin, but he was very distressed because he had bad cancer. And he came really, really upset because he knew how serious it was. And during the Eucharistic healing service, I was telling people, I tell you, look at Jesus. Your eyes are windows. And when you look at Jesus, you're looking at God. You're not looking at a host, a piece of bread. You're looking at God. If you could see him, you wouldn't be able. Moses couldn't look at God. God is so humble that he put himself into the piece, a little host. That's the one thing that I guarantee you, it is not bread, it's Jesus. So the doctor told me, he said, I was looking. And he said, it's very hard because you say, and we all feel it, it's awful hard to believe. And you have to struggle with, and you think, I should feel different. I should feel different. He said, I really didn't feel it, but I did what you said, sister. Knowing my medical background, because it's hard, I tell them, sometimes the hardest people to convince are clergy and doctors. Because one knows a lot about faith, religion, the other knows a lot about medicine. But he said, as he's looking at the host, it was as if he sensed his voice saying to him, why are you afraid of me? Why don't you look at me? He'd look up and then he said, he put his head down and he couldn't figure out. And he said, I realized as a doctor that healing was a threat to me. I never realized I'm in the medical profession, that I'm also called to a healing ministry as a doctor or a nurse. And he said, when I went home, I had to go back to see my doctor, cancer doctor. And he said, he phoned me, ecstatic. The cancer was completely gone. That was one. At the same healing service, a mother came, and I wrote it down. She was pregnant, and she had in her womb the child was supposed to have a lot of defects and things wrong. And after the mass, the healing mass, 3 days later, her baby, there was nothing wrong. And later, she contacted me, the baby was perfect, and they were telling her to terminate it. That's the power of Jesus. And you can come every Sunday, every day. This Jesus is saying to us, look I live, I'm with you. Not everybody gets healed physically. We all suffer, and we spoke about that, both Father Pablo and myself today, on the power of the cross and the suffering. I mean, none of us are going to be without suffering, whatever way. But Jesus can give you supernatural strength. So we're going to get ready tonight. And as Father Pablo is walking around the church, I'll be praying, uniting my prayers with you. But don't think that you have to feel. You may feel nothing, but just keep saying, Jesus, I believe, and ask him for whatever you need. And I will pray with you. And I guarantee you that if you have faith, because you wouldn't be here. And if you came to see Sister Briege, I don't have anything, but I do have Jesus. Like what the apostle said, we don't have silver or gold, but I know Jesus. And that priest who will carry Jesus, and these priests, they are able to give us the living Jesus through the sacraments. So let's prepare now to meet Jesus. And I'll pray it. Father will slowly go through all of the church. And if you don't mind, this chair you're sitting on, Father, when you come up, carry it up for me. I'm going to sit while we're praying. And you don't have to kneel if you're not able to, but look at Jesus. Don't bow your head. When Father comes to where you are, put your face up and tell Jesus. The other thing I'd tell you is, even for people at home, those of you who are watching on the, the webcam, you also, I know many people have been healed through the ministry at a distance, but you recollect yourself and remember that wherever you are, Jesus knows you, because every one of us is special to him. And for those that you're praying for who may not be here, who couldn't come, Jesus will help you. He will give you the graces. Just ask him. He didn't say, ask and you might receive. He said, ask and you shall receive. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened.